Hello to all. I am Corey Thompson of Pivot Up, and I am here today with a great man full of knowledge, Mr. George Frierson. Today, Mr. George Frierson, he's going to tell us about his journey. He's going to tell us about his passion, and I'm hoping that we all learn something from his journey and his passion. Today, we're going to look through the window of history. We understand that looking through the window of history can provide insight for a successful future. Mr. Frierson, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Reverend Thompson.
Good. We're so happy that you are with us. We are happy that you are ready to share knowledge of our past, of who we are and our accomplishments, the things we can do. Our journey as black people, our journey was very immense. Even though our situations we face was very cumbersome, we still rise to the top. And he's going to today show us how we rose to the top, an accomplishment that we as people, the accomplishments that we were able to conquer. Mr. Frierson, you are a historian. Tell us a bit about your journey of becoming a historian.
Reverend Thompson, I was born on December the 9th, 1952, in the big city of Alkaloo, South Carolina.
Alkaloo?
And to those who may not know it, Alkaloo has a connection with something that's not so great. It is a place where the youngest person executed in this country at the age of 14 was living in 1944 when he was accused of killing 2 young white girls. Now, at that time, I was not born. But this particular incident was talked about all my life. And as I matriculated through education and I went to college, I actually am an accountant by education. And I'm a lawyer by passion and also a historian. And as I walked through the path of education, I thought about what a great thing it would be if someone's purpose was to share the history of our people with my fellow brothers, and so I took that path. I was born, as I say, on December the 9th, 1952, and on that day in Washington, D.C., there was a case going on called Brown versus the Board of Education, which consisted of 5 cases, and the first of the 5 cases was named Briggs v. Elliott from Somerton, Clarendon County, South Carolina, and I like to tell people why Miss Leola Frierson was busy having a funny-looking little dude down in Alkaloo. There was something great and monumental going on in Washington, D.C. And having called her name, today is February 11th, 2023. Her date of birth is February 11th, 1925.
Wow.
So if she was still with us, she would be 98 years old today.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, happy heavenly birthday, as they say.
Amen, sir.
So why is history so important to you? And why do we need to teach the people about their history?
I like to sometimes go back to the Word of God, which none of us should be able to dispute.
Absolutely.
And God says, thou shalt not kill in Exodus 20 and 13. But in the beef part of the 5th verse of that same chapter, he said, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children to the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me. And he's speaking to his prophet Hosea. Hosea came to a conclusion, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge.
Absolutely.
Because thou have rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee. Thou shalt be no priest to me, seeing thou have forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children.
Absolutely.
But David wrote in the Psalms 127 and 3, it said, lo, children are an inheritance from the Lord, and the fruit of the womb of his reward. And when I put all that together,
My. My. That's a word all by itself. So let's talk about the genesis of your journey of becoming a historian.
Well, again, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I went back to college after I got out of the military. I got a job had a family. Reverend Arcus Frierson, who's a friend of yours, is the youngest of our 4 children. And I just looked at how America was not what it said the creed is.
That's right.
And I started looking at things and memorizing them. And Dr. Kelvin Lemon, our senior, who actually is the principal of Manning High School right now, at that time, he was my principal at East Clarendon Middle High School in Tuberville. And he called me in and we were just talking about some things. And he made a profound statement. He said, now, Mr. Frierson, he said, you're a man of knowledge. He said, but what if you were just riding down the road, minding your own business, somebody runs a stop sign and hits you and kill you? He said, all that knowledge that you have, he said, where does it go? So he handed me my first flash drive, a 2-gig flash drive, and I've been on the road ever since.
And I'm going to feed off that, and I mean, impart a motivational twist or tip. With all that knowledge, they said that the richest place in the world is the graveyard. And with all that knowledge that we have and all our power and our strength, some of us, we die taking that to the graveyard. The invention, our gift that God has given you, some of us, we die and take that to the graveyard because we are not strong enough or have enough courage to step out and to do what God has called us to do and to be what God has called us to be, because God has given each and every one of us a calling, a gift. Your gift is to teach our past, our history. Your gift is to help us propel towards our future. And sir, we thank you for your gift.
And I thank you. I don't have to go for a Sunday morning sermon tomorrow because I've heard it already on Saturday. but again, to piggyback off what you have said, my current pastor, he and I first encountered at Society Hill AME Church Cemetery down in Jordan. And I was speaking at Harmony Elizabeth Presbyterian Church one day, and he did the introduction of me. And he said, well, Brother Frierson, and our first meeting was at a graveyard. That wasn't all that complimentary, but as you say, I go there because those that have been with us, that is no longer with us, those are their final secret resting place. And let's hope that they left something behind that somebody can piggyback on.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Which the question I have for you, what are you leaving behind? What are you leaving behind for humanity? There's something inside of you that the people need. What are you leaving us? We never know when. We don't know when our time is up. Tomorrow, next year, 2 years from now. But whenever, before God calls you home, leave something behind. Doctor, I'm going to call you doctor, just because of your knowledge. Doctor, tell us about some of this fine artwork and as well as the history of our people.
Well, I currently serve here as the curator of the Mary McLeod Bethune Art Gallery and Learning Center, and we are surrounded by people of our past. Well, there is 4 people that's portrayed in here are still with us. General Lord Sig Newton, the commander of the Thunderbirds, the Air Force acrobatic team. This is their past leader. The Honorable James Felder to my rear, who's still with us. In fact, I talked to him the other day, and I'm always ribbing him because his birthday is April the 4th. And he said, now don't you start nothing, George, because that's the assassination day of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., April the 4th. And so he said, don't you start nothing, George. And to my left, we have Archie Reese, who is actually from Maysville. He's a Maysville native, born in 1954 here in Maysville, South Carolina, who actually went to Maywood High School, went to Clemson University, was drafted by the San Francisco 49ers, and a Super Bowl winner.
Wow.
And immediately to my right is Xavier McDaniel, actually born in Columbia, South Carolina. Now, X-Man is still with us. He hasn't made that championship yet, so he's still trying to piggyback and try to catch up with Archie Reese.
Wow.
But I would like to say that you are from where you were born. There's 4 things that happened in your life that you had no input in. You didn't have any input in when you were born. Mm-hmm. You didn't have any input in where you were born. You had no input in who your father and who was your mother.
That's right.
Now, but I can say this without hesitation. Everybody on this planet, or who has been born on this planet, have a father, or had a father, have a mother, or had a mother. Mm-hmm. And when I listen at people dishonoring their parents, yesterday when I actually left Sumter, well, I left here and went to something, I went by and got a plant, a live plant, and I went and put on my first lady's grave. And this morning, I actually was planning on going by there, but I run a little late, so I had to get to the Sumter County Library to do a presentation. And it's raining out there now, but I'm going to get my umbrella, and I'm going back to my first lady's grave, and we're going to spend some quality time with her in her memory. Here's to my far right, that is the Briggs v. Elliott case. There were 5 cases that consisted of in the Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. Most people don't know the first case was from Summerton, Clarendon County, South Carolina, and it was filed in federal courts on the 16th of May of 1950. The second actually was from the Washington, D.C. area. It was called Bowling v. Sharp, and it was filed on September the 11th, 1950. The third case was actually the Brown case out of Topeka, Kansas, and it was filed on the 28th of February of 1951. The fourth case was called Dorothy E. Davis versus Prince Edward County Board of Education of Farmville, Virginia, and it was filed on April the 23rd, 1951. And the fifth case was actually an appeal because it had been decided at the state level in Wilmington, Delaware, and it was called Gebhardt versus Belton. It was won as Belton versus Gebhardt, but those people who did not want our children to go to school with them, they went and appealed that case after a federal judge had made a decision.
Wow.
I'm looking here in South Carolina right now. This past week, Kay Hearns was the only female on the South Carolina Supreme Court, and she was replaced by a white male out of Greenville, South Carolina. So now the 5-member South Carolina Supreme Court are all men. And I say that because Justice Hearns actually wrote the decision against the 6-week heartbeat bill, and they actually said it was unconstitutional. There were people who did not want to accept that, so they changed the court. The deal is there are those people who, if they don't like something, they'll try to change the way it goes or try to change the law. And with the one in the middle, Dr. Bethune is in the middle of 3 iconic black men. The one on the bottom right, Osceola Enoch McCain, was actually born in December 1892 in Sumter, South Carolina. One on the bottom, to his left, is George Washington Murray, who actually was born a slave in Rimmon, South Carolina on September the 22nd of 1853 in a little place called Rembert, Sumter County, South Carolina. And ironically, he is the cousin of the Congressman James Enos Clyburn, our current U.S. Congressman. Dr. Bethune, of course, and the young man on the top to her right, Robert Brown Elliott. I'm going to speak about him later, but I want to say this while I'm on that. Now, I'm an accountant by education. I love math. The greatest mathematician of all times is a young man named Benjamin Banneker, who actually was born on November the 9th, 1731 in Ellicott City, Maryland. One who Thomas Jefferson wrote in a reply letter, say, "Your humble and obedient servant, Thomas Jefferson." So I also like to use this when I'm around children because Benjamin was born in 1731, and in March of 1737, his father bought a 100-acre farm, and he made Benjamin a co-owner. So at the age of 5, Benjamin Banneker was a landowner. The greatest mathematician of all times made the first American-made wood clock out of wood. And we just don't know the greatness of this man. Charted an almanac, was an astronomer, and our children needs to know this.
Absolutely.
How many children knew that at the age of 5,
5.
they could be a land owner back in 1737? So this is 2023.
Wow.
So yes, sir, I get excited, Reverend Thompson, because when I think about the goodness of God,
yes, sir.
and I think about those on whose shoulders I stand, that you stand, and all of us stand, I have to tell the story.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Jeremiah said, what? It's like fire?
Absolutely.
So it's like fire.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here's my question I have for you that are watching. What's your fire? What's inside of your bones? God has put a gift inside of you at an age of 5 years old. So what's your excuse? If you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, what's your excuse? And the good thing about life, you are never too old or too young to learn. You are never too old or too young to start your passion. You are never too old or too young to get on fire to make a change. What else do you have for us?
Well, there's a period in American history after the Civil War. It's called Reconstruction. That is not taught in our schools. And the reason it's not taught in our schools because during Reconstruction in South Carolina was a majority black governing state. By some accounts, when the General Assembly met on July the 6th, 1868 in Columbia, South Carolina, there were 71 blacks and 42 whites running the state. Remember, I'm a mathematician by passion, an accountant, 71 and 42. In fact, South Carolina is the third black republic in this whole world, behind Haiti, behind Liberia, and then there's South Carolina. I was listening at the news about the earthquake in Turkey. I remember in 2010 there was an earthquake in Haiti, and I didn't hear that the United States government was running to aid of Haiti, which is less than 700 miles away from here, in our back door. But they're all the way in Turkey. And I'm not hating on the Ukrainians because, well, it is what it is. But the deal is, if you dance with the devil, you take the devil's money, a lot of times you got to dance with the devil by the devil's music. And in saying that, the Republican Party, which is the predominant party here in South Carolina right now, was started in 1867 by, this is the first president, Benjamin Franklin Randolph, Robert Smalls, Robert Brown Elliott, Alonzo Jacob Ransier, Jonathan Jasper Wright, and others. Now, what is the unique quality of those individuals I just laid? Those were all black men. Those were all black men, and this is the first executive president of the Republican State Committee, Benjamin Franklin Randolph, and there's a cemetery on Elmwood Avenue that bears his name, where he's actually finally resting. And he was a senator from Orangeburg, South Carolina, and I just think about him. Now, going to the ladies, I hear about Greenville, South Carolina, being a place for the American Women's Suffrage Association. Well, now this is not Greenville, and I'm going to read this to you. The Rawlins sisters, on January the 23rd, 1871, Charlotte Robbins presided as chair of a meeting for the permanent organization of the South Carolina Women's Suffrage Association in the home of her sister, Frances Rawlins Whipper, and brother-in-law, State Representative William James Whipper. Their house was on Senate Street, Columbia, South Carolina. And in reference to Washington's birthday, this is a quote coming from Frances Ann. She said, "I am no enthusiastic over patriotic celebrations, as I am counted out of the body politic." And that was stated on February the 22nd of 1868 on Washington's birthday. So we look at these kind of things, and I was to Greenville recently, back in July of last year, to look at the play Stenny and American Execution. And I was involved in a panel discussion about the predominance of execution in South Carolina. And on there, Reverend Hillary Taylor was a member of the panelists. And I was walking one day, Reverend Thompson, and she came across my spirit. And I called her, and she was excited because we exchanged numbers when we were in Greenville. And she asked me, would I consider testifying when South Carolina goes back to, I say, discuss the death penalty. Now, we are talking about dying here. I'm trying to figure out why would you be plotting somebody's death? And they are mad because there are certain companies won't sell them drugs to kill people. I'm trying to figure that out now. And so me being the advocate for George Stenny Jr., well, I ain't going to go no further with that one now. And so we are just looking at these two people in our history. Reverend Randolph was born in 1820 in Kentucky, and Francis Ann Rawlins Whipple was born in 1845 in Charleston, South Carolina. So these are both patriotic people who have done things for South Carolina, although Reverend Randolph is not native born. But even in death, he is providing a resting place for those who have passed on.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yes. All of this knowledge, is priceless. It's priceless.
It is, and after I just mentioned a 14-year-old, I have the picture of a 14-year-old here, and her name is Susie Baker King Taylor. And she actually, at the age of 14, she was the first nurse and teacher for the first South Carolina Volunteers that was organized on August the 25th, 1862 in Camp Saxton, Beaufort County, South Carolina. And that is the first black military unit of the Civil War. Not the 54th and 55th Massachusetts, which was organized in 1863. But the first South Carolina Volunteers were organized on the 25th of August, 1862. And people say, well, why do you get so specific about dates? I said, well, you can't change the date, no matter how you try. And this young lady, born on October the 12th, 1848 in Tableton, Georgia, and she passed on August the 6th, 1912 in Boston, Massachusetts, and she's actually buried in Mattapan, Massachusetts, at Fairview Cemetery. And she wrote a book, My Adventures with the South Carolina First Volunteers, recently the 33rd U.S. Colored Troop. I have an autographed copy of that book, and I read it because it's a memoir, autobiography, or whichever you want to call it, of somebody who was there. She was there. When those men got wounded in battle, she had to mend their wounds. When those men needed to have their clothes washed, she washed them. But she taught them. She taught them.
Wow.
So her name is Susie Baker King Taylor. And I hope you'll get that book because it is, you probably have to go on Amazon to get it, but read it. It's a historical account of a black woman during the Civil War.
Wow. Wow. No excuses at all. I don't care your age, 5 years old, your race, I don't care your gender. No excuses at all. You can make a change. Let's do it.
Well, I want to go behind you and I want to get somebody. This young man here, at the age of 22, he was drafted into the United States military at Camp Jackson, South Carolina, and he was a member of the 371st Infantry, which was a part of the 24th Infantry. He was what we call a buffalo soldier. And out of all of World War I, there were only 2 blacks that received the Medal of Honor, and he's one of the 2. Now, next door we have what we call the Wall of Honor in the museum, and there's also a World War I veteran that is on there, and his name was Private Ellison Moses, who was born in 1892 right here in Maysville, South Carolina. And on September the 30th of 1918, in France, when ordnance and artillery is blowing all up around him, men falling down on the field of battle because they were wounded, he went and suffered and exposed himself to all of that to make sure that nobody was left behind. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the second highest military order, but we are working on having it take one step. That's all we want, one step. And the next step is the Medal of Honor. And so Stowers and Johnson will have a companion. So there'll be 3 legs on those stools rather than 2. And this is a South Carolinian born on January the 12th, 1896, in a little place called Sandy Springs, Anderson County, South Carolina. And for y'all who may have heard of Anderson County, that is the home of the Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, born on the 29th of November, 1976, in Anderson County, South Carolina. So yes, sir, we have this, and I as a soldier, I want Mr. Ellison Moses to actually get that award, but here's something I was working on a couple of years ago. Down where I live in Gable, there's a church named Malana Presbyterian Church. And I went out one day and I documented all the military graves that were there. And I was talking to a Korean War veteran, and he said, Mr. Frierson said, did you see George Wheeler's grave? I said, I didn't see that grave, because the Wheelers have a cemetery, a family cemetery out on Farmington Road. So he said, no, sir, he's buried there. Because he was a member of Malana. So I thought I may have skipped something. So I went back and checked behind myself, and I didn't see the grave. So he said, well, he's buried beside his brother Joe. Well, Mr. Joe was also a Korean War veteran, and he has a headstone and whatever. And so Mr. Joe's widow is still living, Miss Mary Lou Wheeler. And I called Miss Mary Lou, and I said, Miss Mary Lou, I said, Mr. Boston told me that your brother-in-law is buried next to your husband. She said, he is? But now Miss Mary Lou is 95. So I thought maybe, she got a little carried away. And so I called Reverend Cornell Hampton, who was the pastor, the previous pastor there. So I said, Reverend Hampton, I said, do you know where Mr. George Wheeler is buried? He said, yeah, he's buried beside Joe. I said, well, how do you know that? He said, I preached his funeral. So that was the end of that one. And so I went and I called his son, Perry Singletary, who actually lives in Washington, who had ordered the headstone on 2 occasions, but it was never delivered. And so I went to Samuel's funeral home and I had them check it out. They didn't have it. And so Ernestine Green said, well, George, I tell you what. She said, let me send those guys out there in the old warehouse and check for it. So she called me a couple of days later. She said, George, I have it. Now, he died. Actually, he was born on December the 13th, 1921, and he passed on November the 20th, 1981. And this headstone was put there on the 27th of February, 2021, almost 40 years after his death. And I say that for a reason. If you serve in the military, and if you have an honorable discharge, The military will give you a place to be buried, and they will give you a headstone like that. Mr. Ellison Moses, he has a headstone like this, but that does not do him honor because we want him to have Medal of Honor on it, and this is just a regular military stone. So those are the kind of things that Reverend Thompson and I work on, and I just get fed up, and I keep on walking. And you know, when they got back to Washington, the son and the daughter-in-law called me, and they thanked me. They said, "Thank you. This is one of my fallen brothers. It was my duty to make sure that he's buried with dignity and honor. It's my duty. It's no thank you for that. It's my duty."
Wow, wow, wow. This is rich knowledge, and we can sit here all day long and feast off this knowledge. We can sit all day long, and I'm hoping that this knowledge is igniting a fire within you to do something different, to do something more, to be greater. I'm hoping that this knowledge is getting on the inside of you, and I'm hoping that this seed is growing roots. And I'm hoping and I'm praying to God that your harvest will be a harvest like yours. A harvest you can teach the next generation to be better, to be greater, to reach higher. I'm hoping that your harvest will be a harvest that will lead to a brighter future. Mr. Frierson, you have imparted knowledge within us, and we thank you. But before we close out, do you have anything else?
Well, I want to say this. After we're talking about education and knowledge, University of South Carolina was integrated in 1873. Now, in the 1950s and the 60s, black could not go to the University of South Carolina, which is a public university. Then in 1963, there were 3 students that petitioned to go back to the University of South Carolina, and they denied them until the point that they sued and they prevailed. Their names are Robert G. Anderson, Henri Monteith Treadwell, who is a female, and James L. Solomon, who actually worked with DSS as their director for quite a while. And their attorneys in that case was the Honorable Matthew J. Perry. The federal courthouse in Columbia, South Carolina is named the Matthew J. Perry Federal Courthouse, and Donald Sampson, who was an attorney, actually born in Sumter, lived in Greenville, and actually was a part of a group that actually advocated for his sister, who was on the wall back there, Irene Sampson versus Sumter School District 2. Back in 1964, he was a part of that team of lawyers to actually get her case heard, and it was an employment case. And so Mr. Dreyfus Williams, her husband, who was on the top picture back there, he's now 93 years old. He was born on January the 2nd, 1930 in Sumter, South Carolina. So on the 2nd of January of this year, I called him and wished him a happy 93rd birthday.
Wow, amazing.
And you know, if I had my phone on me, I would call him and let him tell y'all hi.
Amazing. Wow. I don't know about you, but I feel special. I feel motivated. I feel as if I haven't done enough yet. I can do more. You can do more. So now ask yourself, what more can you do? Inside of you right now, God has put something special inside of you. Extract that gift out of you and do more. What's stopping you? What's holding you back? Nobody but yourself. Mr. Frierson, if somebody wants to contact you, how can they get a hold of you and your knowledge?
Well, I'm the curator here at the Maysville Museum, and the number here is 803-347-2643, and that will go to the mayor of Maysville, who is the grandniece of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, and her name is Geraldine Holloman Miller. and they will contact me and let me know that there's someone seeking. Just like I got a call while I was doing a presentation in Sumter at the library this morning, and there's someone want to do something with me who lives up in Washington. And we just love it because, as I said, it's like Jeremiah, it's like fire shut up in my bones. And I want to tell the story. And we are just grateful. I tell people, I do this all year round, not just February. And for those of us who are black, there's an effort now to, I'm going to say, the undermine and destroy black history. And we can't set aside because our children has the right to know that all blacks were not slaves. Mm-hmm. South Carolina law 59-29-55 clearly says it, that it must be taught. So I asked Representative Wendy Brawley, I said, now Wendy, I said, that law has not been repealed. I said, how are they going to handle that? She said, well, George, they say they can get around it. And I'm still trying to find out how you can get around the truth. So that's what I got to say. How can you get around the truth?
Oh man, amazing. Corey Thompson of Pivot Up, on behalf of the whole Pivot Up team, and on behalf of this great historian, Mr. George Frierson, we thank you for tuning in. And I'm hoping that something was said that will help you or propel you towards your future to be greater and to do more. Once again, I am Corey Thompson. Thank you for tuning in.
That you could do.